Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, we get into an overview of snaps lost and snaps returning as we head into 2023, year two under Joey McGuire. And we're also getting the underclassmen radar rolling. Some of those guys a little greener behind the ears that have got our attention. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On at Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. I'm Casey Cowan. He's the only Chris Level, and back at it again, Chris, kicking off another week. And I got to tell you, with each weekend that passes, truly feels like we're getting closer and closer and closer to football fever setting in. Why does it feel that way? Because that's literally what is happening. We're getting closer to fall camp, and we're getting closer to season 2 kickoff under Joey McGuire. And something that we're going to get to today is really kind of on both ends of the roster spectrum, Chris. We're going to kick it off with a conversation about who's coming and going, who's returning, who has departed, and what did they do for you. We'll talk about some of these snap numbers as far as what you have lost or what you have kept heading into 2023. And then we'll get to maybe the portion of the radar that hasn't had that much attention paid to it just yet. We'll talk about some of these young guys, some of these underclassmen. Some might be newcomers, but don't necessarily have to be newcomers that we're excited about. And obviously the Red Raiders really need to make an impact. But Chris, when we talk about in general, the team overall, the roster overall, we spent a lot of time talking this offseason about how it does feel like you've got some real veteran presence on both sides of the football in many different positional groups. And I got to tell you, as I'm looking up and down this list of some of what you are losing as far as snaps played or some of what you have returning as far as snaps played from a season ago, I get excited right off of the bat seeing some offensive linemen at the top of the list. Dennis Wilburn, Caleb Rogers, the two guys at the top of your offensive list as far as snaps returning. Monroe Mills, Jacoby Jackson, not far behind that. But then you also think defensively about your secondary and your defensive front. When you talk about guys like Dadrion Taylor-Demerson, who's at the top of your defensive list, Rashad Williams, Jalen Hutchings, Tony Bradford, high on that list as well. And look, I know football has changed a lot over the years, but there's some key areas where you can really impact a game, right? Trench work, secondary work, and those are a couple of the spots where you do really feel like, hey, you're seasoned, you're old, and you've seen a lot of football in the Big 12 and beyond with some of those guys.
Yeah, we are. We're less than 6 weeks away now from being in Fort Collins / Laramie, Wyoming for that opener. So I guess actually, yeah, we would already know by now if you're 1-0, 0-1, and be ready. We'd be sitting here talking about Oregon, I guess, in about 6 weeks. So we got some time left, but yeah, it's dwindling, and camp starts here in about a week to 10 days or so. You know, and experience in college athletics is key, but experience in the same system is especially key. The reason why I think these snap numbers are more prevalent this year is because you're one of 28 schools, just 28. It's not as many as you'd think, that brought back your head coach and both your two coordinators. There's only 28 schools that did that from the offseason. Somebody made it, whether it's the head coach or a coordinator change or whatever, there's only 28 that had a clean sweep there and that brought all those back. So all those snaps, they're now in the, going to be in the same system as they were last year again. And I think that is especially key because you should be better and a bit more in depth with what you can do because you've played a year in it. I've had, multiple people talk to me about that. I mean, Zach Kitley talked about that back in the spring. It's like, okay, now that we're a year in, now we can start to add some layers to this deal. And your guys up front, because the ones that you lost that are in those snap counts, you did have Donovan Smith, you did have Trey Cleveland, you did have Weston Wright, and you had SaRodorick Thompson.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm missing anybody else. Donovan, the plan would have been not for him to play because I don't think he would have won the starting job, and so you wouldn't have ideally would have wanted him to play, if that makes sense.
Right.
But he's going to obviously play for Houston now. SaRodorick Thompson graduated, so he was not able to return. Weston Wright just simply wants to, he wanted to kind of move on with his life. He'd been in college for a long time, trying to, I think, make a go of it, professional level, and then he's a smart, brilliant kid. He'll be just fine. Trey Cleveland would have played a little bit, but I think that's why you brought in Dre McCray. And so that's kind of a wash, if not a net positive for you, as Trey Cleveland, I think, ends up going to North Texas. I say all this to point out there's really not anybody of that because, with Weston Wright, you could make the argument it's a net positive on the football field too because they feel like Dennis Wilburn, who will take over that spot at right guard, is a much better guard than he is a center. And we already know we thought he was your best offensive lineman last year. So I think that you don't really lose anything, okay? SaRodorick Thompson is going to be tough. He wasn't obviously able to come back, but his work in the red zone and short yardage and just the ability to get into the end zone, one of the best scorers in school history from a football standpoint. But you have a lot of continuity, and that's what I'm really pleased with. And I think you have a lot of continuity with your wideouts, and I can only imagine that Tyler and Barron have worked extensively with those guys this summer, even trying to sharpen that up. But you have a lot of continuity up front, not necessarily at the same spots that you played in. That's what's tricky. All those snaps that we talked about for all those offensive linemen. 1,107 for Dennis Wilburn and 1,107 for Caleb Rogers, but not at the spot that they will play this year.
For either.
For neither one. And so I think that's worth – and 856 for Monroe Mills at the spot that he will not play at this year. So I think that is but I will take it. I think that they practiced it a bunch in December. They didn't actually use it in the bowl game, and then they've been this way all spring, and they're just experienced, and there's so much versatility there with an offensive line. But I really think your wide receiver group is one that I don't know if you're getting enough credit for it. I get it because you don't have like this bona fide star or playmaker. I think people think Jerron Bradley could be.
Should be.
He's kind of emerging into that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to like on that side of the ball for sure.
I'm going to go ahead and use the word should because I think he's definitely got the capability. So let's go ahead and put those pieces together. But yeah, right behind those offensive linemen, you've got a pair of wide receivers in Jerron Bradley. And I was kind of surprised to see, even with the up and down year as far as availability and health is concerned, that Miles Price was second right there behind Bradley as far as those pass catchers and the snaps that they played a season ago. I think it's fair to not expect much out of the wide receivers heading into this year. I hope they give us much, but the expectation part of it, I think, is fair because last year it was hit or miss. It wasn't consistent. And again, I think it says plenty, Chris, just what I said there, that Miles Price was the second guy on that list, even though he was impacted by injury. I think it says something about, trying to get guys consistently to fill those shoes behind Bradley, and it didn't quite happen. You had some nice moments, here or there, whether it was White or Martinez or Cleveland or whoever we may have been talking about, but sustaining that success didn't quite happen. Didn't even happen for Bradley. Had some really high highs, and then you had a week or two that might be strung together where you're thinking, where is the dude? Was he suited up today? So I think, I'm optimistic about the group, but it's very cautious optimism. If Miles Price is a healthy football player, if Jerron Bradley is a healthy football player, I think you're going to be better than you were a season ago. And it goes without saying that your quarterback availability would impact that as well. You've got more to replace on the defensive side of the football with guys like Muddy Waters, Eldridge, Merriweather, Pearson, Tyree Wilson. You've got guys who are not going to be back who saw a lot of football and played a lot of good football for you. So that'll be a little bit of a different challenge, obviously, there for Tim DeRuyter. But as we said, on the back end and the front end, on that side of the line of scrimmage, you're really led by some veteran experience with guys like Rabbit and obviously Hutchings and Bradford, Chris. But it almost seems like maybe we don't still spend enough time on it. I'll do it every time I have the opportunity. Anytime Dennis the Menace Wilburn is going to be mentioned, I'm going to just sit and marvel at the story that he was a season ago. He's at the top of your snaps played list. And yeah, he was your best offensive lineman and also possibly your best offensive player a season ago. You and I have talked about that several times before. It's just
we thought he was MVP.
I know it's one of the more memorable Texas Tech stories, I think, roster-wise or impact-wise, we've had in a long time, man. I don't remember really anything similar to it for quite some time.
Yeah, and and Dennis is he checks a lot of boxes. I mean, this is why I really trust Zach and Tim and Joey when they start to, and Coach Blanchard and everybody that's involved there on evaluating players and just trying to fight. Because like even when you hear some of these walk-on types that are going to come in that maybe turn down scholarships elsewhere, then you're thinking, man, I'll worry about that whenever they start to get into the mix in a couple of years. Well, Dennis was a guy that they just wanted depth. They thought he could help, and then I just think they struck gold there, man. I mean, I really, because the offensive line has been something that Joey has talked a lot about, and there is some experience there as we've been talking about these snap counts for last year, and it's nice to have a backup like Jacoby Jackson, who maybe is not slated to start, but like what's not listed on the Texas Tech snap count list, how many snaps do you think Cole Spencer and Rusty Stats have played in college? A gazillion.
Yeah.
And so, you're replacing, and that's the thing about the defensive conversation, Cowan, is that, you mention Muddy Waters and Tyree and Reggie Pearson, but you're replacing them, okay, not with like, freshmen or sophomores that haven't really played a whole lot here. You're replacing them with Baskerville and Owens, Linton, these guys that have college experience. That's the beauty of the portal. And that's why I think it's really led to a lot of, and you're a net positive with Braylon Lux coming in over like a guy like Kobe Minor, who I think wanted to kind of grow up and play with. And he hadn't played a ton here. Braylon Lux has. I mean, he's played a lot at Fresno State. So that's just the difference in the sport these days. And that's why some of this, is not as big of a concern as it used to be, like on experience, because you can replace experience with experience.
Right.
But I will say that experience within the same scheme and the same system is just invaluable because 133 Division I schools, I think that's right. They're playing football. Maybe a few more because they've added some have added D1 status, but just 28.
28. That's amazing.
It is. I mean, it really is.
Hey, and we know the other side of that coin. You're just making me think about the defensive coordinator run you had, last decade where it was 6 and 7 years or 7 and 6. I don't even know. You're pulling magic tricks as far as how many DCs you could fit into a number of years, and not in a good way.
And that's why Keith Patterson, I thought, really started to get some traction with the defense here because he was here. And that's why you see Texas Tech ponying up with these guys and giving them 3-year contracts and paying them both right around $1 million a year. That's my, thought on the snap count and continuity and how important it is.
That's the seasoned end of the spectrum. We're going to hit the other side of it. Get your radar rolling. We'll talk about some young guys, some underclassmen we're excited about, and some that Texas Tech needs to make an impact in 2023. Next on Locked On Texas Tech. First, today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors. And if you want a championship team, you need championship parts, and they've all got to fit just right. And it's no different when it comes to your vehicle. Every part's got to fit just right, and that's where eBay Motors is stepping in. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits exactly right the first time, every time. Just head on over to ebaymotors.com, add your ride info to the My Garage portal, and look for the green check to know the part is an exact fit or you're getting your money back. No risk. In sports or in life, confidence is the name of the game, and that's exactly what you're going to have when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from and with the right parts guaranteed, you'll be back in the game and on the road in no time. So get the right parts, the right fit, and at the right prices on ebaymotors.com. FanDuel.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Thanks for joining us once again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you got this podcast so you never miss an episode. With Chris, I'm Casey. We were just talking about some of that experience that you've got at the top of your list, Chris, on either side of the ball a moment ago, but wanted to turn now to maybe some of the inexperienced angles of this team. Some of the younger guys, some of the underclassmen, there may be a newcomer or two, I suppose, that could be on this list, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. But guys that are getting our attention at this point, and this is just how good Chris Level is, folks. We ain't even gotten to fall camp. He can already tell you who to be excited about. You're not getting this anywhere else. Imagine what happens when they put on pads. But Chris, we'll get to some of these that really are needed as far as impact is concerned, but who in general so early on is already kind of getting your attention as far as guys that could be rising stars in 2023?
Well, we all know, and the reason I kind of thought about this as a subject to discuss is because we're in this sweet spot right now where everybody is talking about these teams based on what they have back, what they feel like they know about them for sure. And then obviously there's some projection. I really think that this player is going to be good, or this unit's going to be good, or this head coach will have it figured out. But so much of it is just based on what you think you know. And we know that Texas Tech is going to graduate a lot of folks that a lot of people are familiar with off of this current team. So next year, it's going to be really about the next wave, and that's when you'll start to really see Joey and his staff's recruiting come into play. And to a certain extent, how well Matt and Keith and, Cumbie and all that, how well they recruited at the tail end of their tenure, because some of those guys are going to be, sophomore, junior range. Okay. And so that's where, because it's the next wave, because a lot, again, you're going to say goodbye to a lot of experienced folks. The COVID stuff will kind of, started to go the way of the buffalo and all those things. So I thought, okay, who on this particular team are we talking about a year from now and that we feel really good about, maybe even so much that we know that they've really emerged and kind of kicked the door in a little bit this year when they maybe don't necessarily have to, okay? Yeah. On offense, I would – because I'm going to give you two sophomores here, so They would be juniors next year. I think one or both are starters next year for sure. And on offense, we talked a lot about him, and he needs to make some hay here, but it's his time. And I think that Cameron Valdez is that guy on offense. Taj Brooks is going to graduate. I think Cameron Valdez absolutely adds a different dynamic to the offense. I think if he can show that and kind of show some wiggle or a different style of running that I think that we're used to seeing, I think it helps. I think that Joey has talked a lot about SaRodorick and Taj are so same as that we can't wait to see Taj and Cameron. Not that you wanted to get rid of SaRodorick, but because they're so different, and it will throw off the defense. Last year they were used to tackling the same style of runner. Okay, one that's not really going to get loose on you, one that's going to be really tough to tackle, one that's going to be good in between the tackles, but it's not really a threat to get outside or kind of the one cut and go. And Valdez is that. And so I think it's kind of, it's a different style, and it may throw it's like, when you have the starting pitcher that's throwing 101, and then you bring in the rubber arm, junk ball reliever, and they can't wait on it. They're used to seeing fastball, and then they get up to the plate, and it's like, I can't wait on it, man. It's like you're swinging it just junk. It's like the guy in Major League, man, that he had like Barbasol his hat, and he had all kinds
Yeah.
of creams and everything on his shoulder. He was just trying to get everything he could.
And he knew Jesus Christ could hit a curveball.
That's right.
Harris.
My man Ricky Vaughn, he had the how do we get on the major league? That's my fault. Yeah, so that's I can go defense as well, but I don't know. I'll let you kind of comment on Cameron Valdez if you want, Callan. I don't know. Maybe you have somebody different.
Well, I like to hear that. I don't know what to make of Valdez or where he should be as far as, the timeliness of, all right, it's time for you to take the next step. I mean, kind of just the way I was talking about Bradley, I guess, a few minutes ago. And we talked about Bradley in, heading into 2022 that way. A little grace there because of the quarterback experience of 2022. But I just didn't know where you would find a guy like Valdez as far as the timeline is concerned. But I'll tell you, just wanting to be greedy as a Texas Tech fan, the flashes that we have seen previously leave me wanting to see a hell of a lot more. So I hope that is going to be the case. And yeah, I'm trying to think back. I don't know if you got anything off the top of your head. The last time you kind of had this variety of complement as far as ball carriers are concerned, where you had such a, I guess, dramatically different kind of skill set. I may be missing something obvious, but I've gotten so used to the Thompson and Brooks show, which is a black and blue show. I don't know when you've maybe had something to compare it to as far as, I don't want to get into the old cliche, but why not the thunder and lightning kind of combination?
Yeah, I think Baron Batch, Shannon Woods were kind of similar to this group, in that Shannon was more of he wasn't more of a bruiser. He was more of a get out and run. He wasn't a burner, but Baron Batch was, he was looking to punish you. But he also had some speed to go with it. So yeah, it's I'd have to go back and think about some of the, and we're talking about sophomores that take the next step. I realize, somebody will likely point this out. I want to realize that this was a too much of a layup, that it goes without saying that I'd love to see, Baron Morton be the guy that emerges. But I that's an obvious. So I just pick a position guy that would play some this year that will really, I think, impact it and take a next step. But yeah, you want Baron Morton to do that next year. So he'll be, I guess, already a junior next year, which is crazy. And you know who somebody I thought about? He is off the radar. You know who somebody I thought about? He is off the radar. I think he will factor in some this year. I think he's got a chance to be a surprise, kind of like, whoa, kind of guy. And I thought he really did well in the spring, and he got dinged up, and then he missed the tail end of spring. But this is somebody that played some as a true freshman last year that I know Zach Kitley was extremely high on. And it just kind of, I think the game was moving a bit too fast for him. And that's Coy Aiken, the young man out of Stephenville, who's bigger than everybody realizes. I mean, this is a 6'2", 6'3" kid, and he's the one that I think led the state in receiving yards and receptions and all these things. He's just a really good football player. And, I think they would tell you there were times in the spring where he was just lighting it up, and he was on the same page with Tyler and Barron and really kind of had figured it out a bit. And then he got dinged up and missed the latter part of the spring. But it's not going to surprise me, even with all these returners at wideout, if he gets a chance, if he kind of makes some noise to where you're like, forgot he was there. I didn't realize he was still on the team, or he's on the team, or who's this new kid? I mean, because it's hard to remember all these names.
Oh yeah, and it'll still take some time. I was wondering if I could throw this group at you, because if I could guess at some names that might be here today. I thought maybe there'd be one of this group, which is something like Dingle, Horn, Sanford, Lewis, which kind of sounds like an elementary playground insult. You Dingle, Horn, Sanford, Lewis. What do you think? Because you've mentioned some of those names before this offseason. Some of that was prior to some secondary addition, so that might have changed it for guys like Chapman Lewis or maybe Jordan Sanford or Brendan Jordan. But any of those guys on your radar for these same reasons? I know some of those are very, very young, obviously being freshmen.
Yeah, and we're moving to defense here. And so I'm going to give you another name of a current sophomore.
Okay.
Because I think he's absolutely a starter next year. And I think I was giving the examples of and saying like, what about Koy Aiken? Like, because I think last year there were people like, who is this kid? And he starts showing up, and I think he had maybe a number change, and he didn't play the bulk of the year, but he played at the tail end. And he just lit it up, and then he got hurt in the bowl game. That's Isaac Smith. Isaac Smith is, a sophomore this year. This is the way that this is supposed to work. He was able to come here, red shirt, kind of started to get his feet wet a little bit, and he started to play some as a sophomore. And I think next year, he will play some as a sophomore this year, and then next year as a junior, I think he's probably a starter. He's the one that was just running around like big time motor, and I think he's taller than people thought he was because he's like 6'3", 6'4", and he's got, I kept telling you whenever you'd be around this program in the spring, he was the one that got hurt in the bowl game because the Ole Miss offensive lineman that was just playing really dirty basically just stomped on his hip. Like after a play was over and Isaac was just running around crazy, this guy, this offensive lineman, this tackle gets him in a compromised position and then just stomps on his hip. And everybody on the sideline is screaming at the official, like, where, and they never saw it. No flag. It's ridiculous. Well, he needed to get surgery on it. I don't know if it was hip flexor or hip or something. It was semi-minor, but it did cost him a spring. However, when I was out there, and you would be out there in media settings, and he'd walk out there, and he's just gotten so big. I was joking that if they sold his arms in the store, I would save money to go purchase them because and get rid of these bad boys and hook up his young guns because it was just a big dude, man.
6'6", 240 is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I said 6'3". He's basically taller than me, and I'm about 6'5". So I just think he's as big a reason as any. And we can call him outside linebacker, we can call him defensive end. Doesn't really matter. It's all kind of in some ways the same. Yeah. He's as big a reason as any is why I think Joey kind of talks about. I feel like our defensive line may be better than it was last year. Because it's that next wave, the Harvey Dysons, the Bankses, the Burtis's, the on and on. But Isaac Smith belongs in that conversation. And I think he's a potential star, if I'm being honest. I think he's a under the radar guy right now that I think people will really be talking about quite a bit at some point this year. And I think as he heads into his junior year next year, I think we're talking and we're expecting a lot, and I expect Joey to talk about him a lot. But those are Cameron and Isaac Smith will be my two guys.
I like that mention to wrap up the conversation because when you see dude with measurables and we're talking about somebody defensively that could be wreaking some havoc, being a disruptor along that line of scrimmage, would love to have somebody else that we're not maybe all that familiar with right now come out of nowhere and kind of take us by surprise. But you won't be surprised if you're watching Locked On Texas Tech, because now the pride and joy of Wagner, Oklahoma is what I'm seeing for Mr. Isaac Smith.
Is it Wagoneer or Wagner? Is it? I think maybe you're right. It's Wagner. See, this is I'm showing you my.
I don't speak Oklahoman.
Exactly. I don't know my.
It's lost in translation, and I certainly don't want to irritate anybody that's 6'6", 240 from Wagner or Wagoneer, Oklahoma. So
I think it's Wagner.
My bad.
Hey, and before we get out, Calvin, I know that you and I both wanted to. I hope Kim had a great weekend. I hope that we've tried to make it right with her, and I don't know, try to, just be more positive and less embarrassing. So anyway, shout out to Kim on this lovely Monday.
Honestly, I didn't think about it once, Kim. I got to be honest. I didn't. That Friday's like a lifetime ago, so I don't even remember those conversations. But you can always go back in the archives and check them out, right?
That's right. And the summer weekends they can be a marathon now. Yeah, they can't. The ones in the fall, they move a little quicker because we're so involved in what we do. But yeah, some of these summer weekends, man, they can be like 3, 5, 7 days. So yeah.
Not many remaining until we'll be back to doing what we do on those fall weekends. So looking forward to getting there with you. And thanks once again for making Locked On Texas Tech a part of your day, whenever, wherever, or however you're doing it. We appreciate it. Chris, appreciate your time as always, man. Enjoyed it.
Keep hope alive, everybody. Appreciate it. We're here all week, so stay tuned.
That's right. We'll be back on the other side. Hope to see you then for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.